Welcome back to Echoes Across Time. My guest, Daniel, has spent more than 30 years at the crossroads of technology, retail, and consumer brands. Long before digital disruption was a buzzword. In 2017, he joined the founding team of Byte, a direct-to-consumer dental aligner company that reimagined how healthcare products could be sold online. 3 years later, the business exited for $1.04 billion. In 2025, he's doing it again, this time with his son Harry, co-founding Orion Sleep, built on a simple idea. Sleep is the cornerstone of longevity. Orion has launched a smart mattress cover that regulates body temperature through the night and has already raised $17.5 million in seed funding. Daniel also advises a $55 billion private equity fund, has represented the UK government internationally, and is a long-time member of the Young Presidents Organization. What's fascinating is the pattern. Daniel consistently sees where consumer behavior is heading and builds there early. Welcome, Daniel. What has stayed remarkably constant over time with you, Daniel?
I'm a very level-headed person, so I don't particularly get stressed. And I think that's, it's a pretty rare ability. And I think I've seen friends over the years, go up and down as businesses work and don't work. And obviously I've had that. I've had successes, I've had failures, but I don't let them get me down. So I think being able to remain positive, remain optimistic, and glass half full, I think has been my kind of constant.
Tell me about one of your failures. I'd love to sort of understand a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, my first .com was actually my first entrepreneurial endeavor back in 1998, Web 1.0. I'm showing my age there. So I co-founded with my brother an online shopping portal, a focus around comparison shopping. And over the next 3 years, we had a crazy ride. We built the biggest shopping portal in Europe. Believe it or not, this is before Google, which my kids find it hard to understand.
Yeah, there was a world.
Yeah, exactly. Shopsmart.com.
Yeah.
And, we did everything right at the time. We built a fantastic platform business, but we got the market timing wrong. We were about to IPO in April, May 2000 for $500 million. I did the roadshow. We were kind of ready to go. And the market collapsed the week before our IPO. And meanwhile, we had turned down a $250 million cash offer a couple of months before. So definitely, that was a big learning for me. And it's, sometimes you can have the right idea, you can have the right business, but timing, can be the thing that takes you down. So that was my first entrepreneurial endeavor.
Yeah.
And the most painful,
And if I take you back to the moment when you knew this wasn't going to work because of the change in market conditions, how did you deal with that personally, emotionally?
I mean, listen, at the time I was young, I was 28, 29 years old, and that was definitely a roller coaster for me.
Yeah.
And I just, I immersed myself in it. I mean, I was in the office 7 days a week. I mean, at the time this was, I'd been, relatively newly married. I just had my first kid who was, a few months old sort of thing. And I immersed myself in work is the truth. And it was a very all-encompassing time.
The reason why I'm asking is obviously it goes to the heart of how you deal with adversity. And I think that's a really important lesson for everyone. How do you respond when the roof falls in, so to speak? And your reaction to it was, well, it's just nose back to the grindstone, basically.
It was, I think, that kind of entrepreneurial DNA. I think the truth is, there are people who are built for this and there are people who are not built for this. And anyone who thinks that being an entrepreneur is the holy grail, it's the, this is what everyone should be doing and everyone should aspire to be an entrepreneur, I would, firmly disagree. I think this is absolutely not for everyone. And there are plenty of people that build amazing careers inside businesses and, manage to get that kind of work-life balance and have very successful careers. So this is, being an entrepreneur is not for everyone, for sure.
No. Yeah, I agree with that. And how did you become an entrepreneur? You were employed before you started this business?
I was, but I was always aspiring to be an entrepreneur. When I was at school, when I went off to university, I wanted to start a business, and my father's advice was go and get experience somewhere else. And I left university back in 1992 and before the internet days, and there was no starting an internet company from your dorm. I worked for Tesco. It was my first job in the UK,
Right.
biggest grocer in the UK. They were the second biggest at the time.
Yeah.
I joined them as a graduate trainee, and very quickly I got promoted into head office, corporate marketing, and then buying. And I was a cake buyer at Tesco. So that was the start of my career, learning in the cold face of retail and being thrown into a store where, you are literally snacking shelves and manning the tills. And
Yeah.
I mean, that for me was the best learning ground. And what I learned at Tesco has been invaluable in setting up my career for sure.
And what was it that got you on the path of setting up your first business? What was the catalyst?
So I left Tesco, went to work for Revlon. I ran the marketing for Central Europe, and then I did a stint in New York in 1997, working for the CEO of Revlon on a consultancy project. And the internet was just starting to take off in 97. And there I was in New York, the internet was taking off. And I saw a thing where I didn't know how to access things online. And I was, an early adopter of the internet and buying things online.
Yeah.
But it was very difficult to find things. And this is before Google. So that gave me my first idea. Hang on a second, this internet thing, I think it's going to take off.
Yeah.
And I think there's an opportunity here. I've now had my kind of 7 years of experience. I work for Tesco, I work for Revlon. I've learned, from two big companies, how to do things, how not to do things. I think I've become a decent manager, and I had some, I built some good skill sets, and I thought now's the time.
I mean, you had obviously got a loose hypothesis in your mind that there was an opportunity here. Do you feel that once you started, you kind of knew this was what you were always meant to do?
There was no looking back. Day one, I left the corporate world, started my internet company, and things exploded overnight. When I told my father I had this idea for a business back in kind of end of 97, early 98, he's like, well, hang on, how do you know the internet's going to take off? And everyone was on ISPs, which you'll remember. Everyone was,
of course,
dialing into the internet. The minute I set up the company, end of 98, we launched February 99, that the market just started taking off. And I remember going to a cocktail party in London. It was called First Tuesday. It was like the first internet kind of dedicated kind of networking event.
I remember it.
Okay, well, there you go. So that first one in London, we raised our first, I can't remember how much we raised, a couple of million dollars, like a 15 million valuation. And it was like three of us in an office in Staples Corner, North London, with a business plan, and that was when okay, this is going to work, and this internet's going to take off. And but I love going into industries where there's a tailwind. I hate a headwind. I hate it when you gotta force something. You gotta tell everyone this is, the internet back in, 98, 99, 2000, it had so much tailwind behind it where everyone was like, oh my God, this is an amazing thing called the web. Yeah. We can find things, we can buy things, we can get resource, we can read our news. It was, and that was, for me, there was absolutely, from day one, there was no turning back.
Well, definitely, of all the people I've met, Daniel, you are one of the purest entrepreneurs, and I think lots of people could learn from speaking to you about entrepreneurialism. But I'm not going to go down that path with you, because we are going to dig a little bit deeper on the emotional side of things. And so I'm interested in what sort of emotional environment you grew up. What was young family life like?
Yeah, very safe. My parents are still today. They're in their 80s. We went back to London in September to celebrate their 60th wedding anniversary. So quite a lot of my friends, when I was at boarding school and university, parents were getting divorced, and, having to split their time in two homes, and all that comes in, the emotional, insecurity of not having that kind of stable family life. And I felt very fortunate and very blessed that my parents, were still together. They loved each other. They enjoyed spending time. And we had amazing We had a family place down on the south coast of England, and we'd go there for weekends and for summers. And that was a very special time growing up. So I think having that family environment with a close-knit family gave me that kind of safe space. And definitely I felt, in a warm, loving family environment.
Now, you obviously will know that a lot of people who go on to be very driven entrepreneurs often come from a background with some adversity, and often that's family adversity. You're different because you actually came from a very loving, secure environment. Can you put your finger on what made you? I mean, most entrepreneurs are people who are a little bit nonconformist. They think a little bit out the box, a little bit differently from other people. Safe, loving, secure environments don't always foster that sort of thinking. Can you put your finger on why it is that you came out of that environment but had these characteristics as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, for sure. So my grandfather was an entrepreneur, and we had a family business. My great-grandfather invented the photocopier. Also, it was a duplicator back in those days, became the photocopier. And that was our family business for 110 years. My father sold it in the late 1980s whilst I was at high school. So I grew up, with this kind of heritage of entrepreneurialism. My father wasn't an entrepreneur. He stepped in to run the business. My grandfather passed away when he was 16, and he stepped in at 21, straight out of college, to run the business for the next 30 years. But that growing up, absolutely was fascinated by it and saw the business and was always, driven to the idea of doing something on my own and starting a business. And my grandfather being an inventor, that was just kind of exciting to me.
Yeah, that is great. And was your grandfather British? Did he come from the UK?
No, so my great grandfather was Hungarian.
Right.
And he moved from Hungary to the US and then moved to the UK in the late 1890s to start the family business.
Right.
What became the family business. So,
yeah.
And then the rest of the family kind of obviously born in London.
Yes. And do people say that you were like your grandfather, sort of character-wise?
It's difficult to know. I mean, this was a long time ago. And obviously my grandfather died in 1956.
Yeah.
And it was a very different era, just the way they did things, the business, it was a different world. And so incomparable. So it's difficult to compare.
And your mum's side of the family, where do they come from?
So my father's mother was from Switzerland. So
yes.
She's Swiss. My mother's mother was from Prague. And she actually escaped the Nazis
right.
and came to London. And her father was German, but he left Germany in the early 1930s. So I'm quarter Swiss, a quarter Hungarian, a quarter German, a quarter Czech.
Yeah, very European.
Very European. And I'm in the process of applying for a Czech passport. So I'm going to have a British and a Czech passport.
That's great. That's fantastic. What did your parents teach you when you were young? What did you learn from them?
I think I learned my kind of values to, number one, kind of appreciate what I had. And number two, always be good to people. And what goes around comes around. And number three, philanthropy. So my family we had a big history of donating. And my grandfather did a lot. And my father and mother did a lot. My father was involved in multiple charities. He was on the board of, he was chairman of something called ORT, which was a big charity. And there were multiple kind of charitable kind of endeavors growing up, kind of was part of that I was witness to. And definitely I thought that, right, this is something I want to contribute to as well and something I want to give back to.
And do you think the catalyst for that was my family, my parents, think this is important, therefore I think it's important, or was it something deeper?
I think it was just deeper. I think this was like an inbuilt, this is something I want to do. And part of my life journey is not just about me, it's about building a family around me and being able to give back and being able to support others where I can. Like now, for example, I love mentoring people. I love giving advice to people. I don't charge for it. I'm not interested in someone comes to me for advice, or, I'm not interested in charging. This is about how can I help other people be successful. And my kids, by the way, are the same way. So in COVID, all three of my kids set up charities, and all three did amazing things, not because I suggested they do it,
Yeah.
not because I told them to do it, because they all wanted to do it, and they all, in their own right, had very different ideas of how they could help and how they could add value, and they all did it. So I think it's definitely something you want to help people, you want to give back,
Yeah.
or it's just not something that doesn't come naturally to you.
You mentioned sort of what goes around comes around, the sort of karmic belief that what you put out is going to come back to you in some sort of way. It may not be directly connected. And, was that something that you think your parents had that as well, that same view?
And the other thing was, if you step on people on the way up, then,
yeah,
kind of watch out the way down. I mean, that's the polite way of putting it. But for sure, I do believe in karma. I do believe in, if you're good to people, who will be good to you, and good things happen to good people. And I think there are plenty of people who don't live by that belief system, and who go through life in a kind of an aggressive mindset, and try and step on people on their way up. And inevitably at some point it comes crashing down, whether it's their health, whether they're, or their marriages break down, their, friendships, there's lots of, or businesses fail. I just think if you can go through this world, be successful, doing good along the way, and building people up, why wouldn't you do that? Which is quite, by the way, it's quite an un-British thing. The kind of, live in America obviously now, and everyone is very supportive and warm and inviting. And the UK, I grew up in an environment where that wasn't the case. The British are very stoic and very, it's you don't celebrate success in the UK the way you do in the US.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of tall poppy syndrome in the UK. Yeah, absolutely. So do you think that, some of how you are and your views on these things have been shaped by faith? Is faith something that's important to you, either religious or non-religious?
I think so. I mean, I'm Jewish. I grew up Jewish, and that's my, identity. I'm not a, Orthodox Jew. I'm not a super practicing Jew, but I do believe very much in that. Those are my roots. That's where my family's come from. And that's given me a sense of identity. And I do think it's important to have some sort of sense of identity, whatever it is. And you don't have to be super religious or super observant in whatever religion it is, but having an identity, knowing where you come from and who you are, I think is super important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's incredibly important. When you grew up, did you go to synagogue? Did you observe the Sabbath? Any of those sort of things?
We didn't observe the Sabbath, but we did do Friday night dinners as a family.
Right.
And we went to synagogue on High Holy Days.
Yeah.
But we weren't a kind of, every weekend we've got to be in shul, and, we weren't super kind of strict on anything, but I had the identity, lighting candles on a Friday night, fasting, on our Day of Atonement once a year, that there are those things that have kind of stuck with me to this day.
Would you say the way your parents approached it and the way that you approach it with your children are the same sort of approach?
My parents were stricter about we didn't go out on a Friday night.
Right.
Growing up. And the minute I moved to America, my kids are like, listen, Friday night is the big night that everyone goes out. We can't not go out. We won't have a social life. And my wife and I acquiesced on day one, and we're like, listen, we want our kids to be happy. And, we kind of come up with a compromise. And so I do things differently to my parents, but with that same guided belief that religion is a core part of who we are in whatever way you choose to celebrate it, or, it doesn't matter religious or not religious. I've taken that from my parents, and I think I've instilled it in my kids as well.
And community, is that connected to faith in your mind?
It's interesting. So in the Jewish religion, family is very important. And there are lots of religions where family is very important. And that for me is, a lot of my friends are, different religions.
Yeah.
But everyone, it's like family is at the heart of what they do. I think that's what religion is to me. But I've got friends of all religions, and
The subject of religion is sort of endlessly fascinating. I grew up with a born-again Christian father, which was very difficult. But when you think about your values, are they shaped by your faith, or are they independent of your faith, do you think?
I think independent. I think I've created my own values.
Yeah.
And values that I'm proud of, and that I can turn around and say, this is what I stand for. This is who I am.
Yeah.
And as I said to you before, I'm not going to step on someone's head to make an extra buck.
Yeah.
That's not me.
Yeah.
Plenty of people will do that, but that's not me. And I have, as I said, I've sacrificed, maybe I could have achieved more if I, was less present, but I've decided that being more present was more important to me than just making more money.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you think that there's a value that you have that sort of sticking to it has cost you? I don't mean necessarily financially, it could be financially, but has cost you in any other sort of way, friendships, relationships, maybe a business deal, I don't know. Is there something that you can point to and say, I was true to my values, and unfortunately, XYZ didn't work as a result?
Yes and no. I mean, from kind of a friendship perspective, family perspective, no. But from a business perspective, there are deals I haven't done over the years because values didn't align, and it didn't smell right, or I didn't think it was kosher, or there was something that just wasn't, I didn't feel I could add enough value to it in who I am. So yeah, for sure on the business side, there are things I haven't done, which, there's always like this COVID, there are so many people who jumped on the bandwagon of, making a fortune on the back of, being able to have relationships in Asia and put deals together. And that just for me was not a focus and not a priority. It was, and I know people who did, by the way, and made a lot of money out of it, but that just wasn't something for me that was of interest.
Yeah, interesting. And did you ever have a situation where you thought you had a value, but actually when it came down to it, that wasn't something that was really that important to you?
I don't think so. I think I've been very true to kind of my values, and, being
consistent
and honest, and like moving to America, for example, I believe in honesty and being direct. And, in America, because of this culture of people don't like to say no, they do the dance and like fundraising in America, you can go and, you never have a bad meeting in America. And,
yes.
And I believe in being totally honest and direct, which some people don't love in America. It's like, well, hang on a second. What about a second meeting? Let's discuss this some more. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be really honest with you. This isn't a fit. And these are the reasons. So it's...
When you chat with your kids, and I know they're not sort of very young anymore, do they ever ask you, Dad, what values are important? Or do you ever say to them, look, the values that I try and live by are ...
I think I haven't had that explicit conversation with them, recently as adults.
Yeah.
But certainly as children, we instilled it in them, and we practice what we preach. We absolutely lived our true to kind of what we preach to them. So they definitely saw that, and that has become instilled in them.
And that would be kindness, honesty, integrity,
giving
those sort
back,
of things. Yeah.
Community, as you said before.
Yeah.
Building friendships, relationships, being there for your friends, supporting people. I've got 3 very good friends going through divorce at the moment. Yeah. And I'm there for them, and I support them, and it's unpleasant at any time, any stage of your life, and especially when there are kids involved, and but showing up for people and being there for your friends, I think, is important.
I'm often asked what's the difference between the US and the UK, and there's lots of answers. But one of them I sometimes say is I find that the US can be a bit more transactional in terms of relationships than the UK. When it comes to something like superficiality or, the transactional nature of some relationships, Do you ever chat with your kids about those things and how to manage that?
I do. And for sure, there is an element of that.
Yeah.
But if you get beneath the veneer, there are some super genuine people, and we've made some great friends in
Yes.
America. So obviously, my British friends, I grew up there. I was there for the first 45 years of my life. So I've got some deep relationships and deep friendships that I've had for a very long time
Yes.
since school and university.
Yeah.
But I would say in the 10 years I've lived in California, I've made some great friends who, I would consider will be friends for life. So I think there is, as I said, you meet people and there's that superficiality of, oh my God, it's so amazing. You're so great. But who are the people you're going to get to know more and who actually, like, you're asking the right questions, you're probing. There are people, there are friendships and relationships I've got. Well, we do the same thing. We challenge each other. It's like, everything's great. Well, is it great?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like, are you about to get divorced? Do you,
Yeah. Yeah. Are you having issues? Yeah. Do you maybe want to talk about something? Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. One of the things that I felt in talking to you is you don't really see the world through the lens of there's me doing what I'm doing and there's adversaries out there. You see it through the lens of there's me doing what I'm doing, and then there's a whole world out there of potential collaborators. And I'm just going to find the ones who are the best to collaborate with. I think a lot of people do have this sort of, you're not on my side, so you're my adversary. Why are you different in that regard? Why do you think differently?
because I just think, the world is big enough for us all to coexist and all to go about our business. Like, for example, I've never sued anyone.
Yeah.
You come to America, it's the world of,
Yeah.
litigators and lawyers and, I mean, the worst thing for me, these ambulance chasers,
Yeah.
and this mass tort, mass litigation.
Yeah.
I just think it's horrific. And I've been approached by so many, do I want to be party? We're suing, Visa because they did X or Y. And I will never be a part of any of those.
Yeah.
This is a big enough world that we can all do what we want to do and we can coexist. And let's not rain on each other's parade. Let's, I mean, for example, in competitive businesses and in my markets, what I've been part of, a rising market, rising tide rises all boats.
Yeah.
And we all benefit from it. We
Yeah.
don't need to be trying to kill each other in the process. And I've never gone down that or had that belief system that for me to be successful, somebody else has to fail.
Yeah.
So that's just and by the way, there are mergers and acquisitions and collaborations and partnerships, etc. So there are many instances where you collaborate with your competition, but I don't believe that my winning is somebody else losing. I believe I'm building businesses in markets that it's big enough for us all to coexist.
You've been very successful. I'm sure you're going to continue being very successful. How have you dealt with ego? What is your own sense of yourself?
It's interesting because, yes, to some people I've been very successful, but to other people, I'm like, 1% of the success they've achieved. So I'm always enamored meeting people who have achieved great things. And for me, I'm always aspiring. I'm an aspiring entrepreneur. Yeah, I've built some businesses that have been successful and people have made money, including myself, and that's great. But I'm not the fountain of all knowledge. I only know, 1% of what I want to know. I'm always learning. I do this annual course at Harvard every January. I've just come back from it last week. I'm 8 years into a 9-year course, which gets me an exec MBA at the Harvard Business School, which is just fascinating for me. I'm still learning, and I'm at that stage in life where, I don't think I'm ever going to know. I mean, AI is so humbling. It's just, I am not an AI native. Now, my businesses and the people we're hiring, AI natives, and that for me is just, it's a humbling experience. So my ego is not, I know everything and, and I'm the expert on this. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination. So it's quite, every day I'm humbled being in team meetings and hearing kind of what we've got going on and how we're doing things. And I am reminded of how little I know in this new world that we find ourselves, where AI is, dominating dominating the kind of world we live in all aspects, not just business, but in every aspect of life. We're leveraging it. So yeah, it's humbling.
I remember you told me the story of how you decided to come to the US. I think it'd be great just to tell that again, because I think it is very humbling when you move countries. So yeah, remind me, how did you make that decision, and how did it go?
Well, it had been a dream for my wife and I. We always fancied living in California. I think all these Californian TV shows back in our day, from Baywatch to 90210 and whatever else, the OC, and I can't even remember what they are now. But California was always that kind of aspirational place where the sun always shines and you live by the beach and you can go and surf and swim. And I lived in London where it was grey for 11 months of the year, and we suffered from SAD syndrome, seasonal associate disorder, for sure. Most of us coming from the UK do, and it was a dream. And my wife and I decided, we're at the point in life where this is the last time we can do it. Our kids were 11, 13, and 15, and we said, if we don't do it now, we're never going to be able to do it. And we just threw caution to the wind. I was in the process of selling a couple of businesses in the UK. We bought a house here in Santa Monica. We sold our house in London. We moved over and we started again. And it was, as my wife and I have discussed many times since then, if we had sat down and done a spreadsheet and written the pros and cons of selling our house in London, moving to LA without a support system, without a network, without a job. It wasn't a job that brought me here. I made that happen, but it was belligerence that made that happen. It was hard work and determination and not giving up that made that happen, as opposed to people who move over here with a job. And that's like an easy decision. Okay, the company's offering me an opportunity to move to New York or wherever from the UK, and all expenses paid. And there's a safety net because I've got an income coming in and they're providing housing. And this was none of that. This was total, talk about entrepreneurialism. That was, put to the test. It's like, can I move to America and start again aged 45 or 44, I think I was at the time.
Yeah. It's a great story. And I think what makes it even more fascinating is you come from this very secure, loving background. You've got a very successful relationship with your wife. You've clearly done well in your businesses in the UK. You've built your network in the UK. You know your world well in the UK. Oh, yeah, we've always fancied this change. Let's just do it. And you did.
Yeah. I thought it was going to be easier than it was. And I thought I had this idea for a business, which I was going to launch in August 2015. And that didn't quite work out the way I thought it was going to work out. But all things happen for a reason. And roll on 18 months, I co-founded a business that, thankfully was a very big success. So I think it was, I hadn't mapped out, how it was going to work, but things worked out.
Yeah. I think it's worth, just for a moment, I mean, it's quite easy to think of your journey as solid, secure, loving, successful. And it's important to remember that the steps along the way have not necessarily always been easy. And there have been moments where you've been, worried, scared, frightened, unsure. How do you deal with those generally?
I just think I'm a super positive person. I'm always a glass half full. So I don't look at what could go wrong. I look at what could go right and what is going to go right. And, good and bad, And as I say, if I didn't have that approach, we never would have done. We've had friends in the UK over the years who are like, I don't know how you did it. We'd love to move. And it's like, well, just sell your house and move. I mean, it's kind of straightforward. And then we've got friends here who are like, they move zip codes and it's like a trauma. And I'm like, well, hang on a second. I moved countries.
Yeah.
I moved from, 8-hour time difference between my parents are and my family where I grew up.
Yeah, you said earlier that you didn't think entrepreneurialism was for everyone, and I agreed with you. And I think there are a couple of qualities that are very necessary. I think that sort of glass half full one, to be able, when you're faced with a challenge, actually to see the opportunity that it's presenting, kind of naturally, rather than the problems, the risks, at the difficulties, I think that is actually quite an essential part of being an entrepreneur. And I don't know even if that's born or learnt behavior. Maybe it's a combination of both.
Yeah, I think you have to be a solutions-oriented person. It's like you come up with a problem, right? What's the solution?
Yeah.
And some people get stuck on, oh my God, there's this problem and I don't know what to do. Let's give up.
Yeah.
And if you're an entrepreneur, you can't afford to give up.
Yeah.
You just have to find a solution.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely in that camp where I will always find a solution to a problem.
Are you a decisive person? Will you make your decisions quickly about things?
Super decisive. Yeah. And again, that's sometimes with as much data as I can get my hands on. So, and I learned that from Tesco, my first job.
Yeah.
You have to make empowered decisions. As a buyer, you have to make decisions based on a limited set of data. And you can do trials and you can do focus groups. You can do all these things, but that will only give you so much data. You've still got to make a decision and you've got to make a bet and you've got to commit to it. So yeah, that's something that's been instilled in me throughout my career.
And have you done the same with your children? And if so, how?
I think my kids have all kind of made their own paths. I think recognizing that we're all different, I think is the key to parenting. So, and just encouraging your kids, whether they're musical, whether they're artistic, whether they're sporty, whether they're, they want to be an entrepreneur or they want to, build a career in a big business. I think just supporting them is, I certainly view that as my job as a parent. Celebrate the fact that we're all different, not try and, create a me too, little mini me's, but give them the tools to be a success in their own right, whatever that looks like for them.
I would think I know the answer to this question, but who has seen the most versions of you?
I mean, I would say my wife for sure. Yeah. When we got together, 30 years ago or so now, 31 years ago, I was at Tesco, and I'm not even going to tell you what my salary was, 25, 24, when I'm 25 when we met, but it was not a lot.
Yeah. Do you think as, you've developed and matured, your relationship has changed, or do you think it has always been a constant?
I think we've both grown and we've both evolved, and I think that's very important in people and in relationships.
Yeah.
And we've gone through different phases of our lives. We were married relatively young, in our 20s. We had our first kid. I was 30, my wife was 26, 27.
Yeah.
And we've gone through different phases. Small kids growing up, kids going off to college, kids out. We're now at that kind of the empty nester phase, they call it. And some relationships break down at this point because you've been too focused on just kids.
Yeah.
And you haven't invested in your relationship, you haven't invested in yourself. You haven't grown and evolved.
Yeah.
So I think being a balanced person and being a mature EQ person, I think is important.
Yeah. Is there anyone that you wished you'd had a conversation with about something and haven't, or you now wish you would have a conversation with but have not done so?
I mean, I'd love to have met my grandfather.
Right.
All I had both my grandmothers around and were in my life and were amazing.
Yeah.
Neither of my grandfathers. And so that, thankfully, my parents, as I said, are still alive and they're in their 80s, and we get to spend time together and we get to travel and, celebrate the good times together. As I said, we celebrated my parents' 60th wedding anniversary last year. So I think I do have a lot of family in my life, which I'm very grateful for. But yeah, I think I didn't grow up with a grandfather; both had passed away, and I think that I would have loved that.
Yeah, you've talked a lot about yourself in terms of how you approach work and your business relationships and your personal relationships. What has your work taught you about other people?
I think give people the benefit of the doubt. I love giving people space to be creative and to add value and to grow themselves. But, I've learned with experience that you have to, if it's not working out and if they're not a fit, you've got to make that decision relatively quickly. But yeah, it definitely that kind of empowering people and letting people grow, I
Yeah.
love. That's a personal, achievement for me when I see people around me growing and thriving.
You've been a leader of people quite often in your companies, right?
Yeah.
And what do you think the key attributes of leadership are?
I think humility. I think the ability to hear people. I think somebody said it. I think it was Richard Branson years ago. The sign of a good leader is someone who surrounds him with people smarter than himself. And I think that's something I live by as well. We're hiring people who are with far deeper knowledge in all the areas of the business than me,
Yeah.
whether it's in our tech team or in our product team or in our marketing team. I started my career as a marketeer, but marketing today doesn't look like marketing when I started my career 30 something years ago, and it's recognizing that.
I often think with entrepreneurs, they often have ideas in businesses that they actually don't know particularly well, perhaps because they don't come with sort of predefined thinking or constraints on their thinking. Is that something that resonates with you?
No, I think you need to get to know your business. You need to get to know your industry. You need to get to know your customers. For me, that's a kind of 101 of starting a business is what is the reason for it? Why do you exist? And why are people going to come to you instead of somebody else? So no, I think you need to understand your business. You need to understand your reason for being. What's your mission? What are your values? What do you stand for?
Yeah.
How do you want to show up?
Have you ever sort of made a fundamental mistake in judging someone else that you've worked with?
Yes, multiple times.
And is there a sort of similar root cause each time? But
I think, when you give people the benefit of the doubt and when
yeah,
you go into it with a glass half full attitude, you are going to make mistakes and you're going to find that some people, sink and don't swim.
yeah,
Some people don't thrive. You give people latitude to grow. Some
yeah,
people don't grow.
yeah,
And you think that they're going to grow with, that you think they're going to want to constantly learn and evolve in their role. And
yeah.
some people don't. And it's just the nature of operating the way I operate. There are going to be people who disappoint you and who don't work out, but not much I can do about that.
Yeah. Do you try when you take on people to encourage them to use their own initiative? And is that an area that's often quite hard to get people to be effective in?
Yes, I love to hire entrepreneurial people,
Yeah.
and people that have maybe done it before. And I've found where people haven't worked out, people who have just come from a big company who have been so blinkered in their career that they've had all the support around them, and then they don't thrive not having that.
I'd like to talk a little bit about your children. I know that they're very important in your life. And as you already said, what's important is to recognize they're all different. They're not all mini-me's. How has having children changed you?
I mean, it fundamentally changed me from me to us.
Right.
Back when I was when I was a teenager and when I was in my early 20s, this was all, I was just on a mission, and having kids mellowed me out, settled me down, and gave me much more of a purpose. I want to be there for my family. I want to do things for my kids. And it fundamentally changed me. I mean, you've got kids, you know what it's like.
I do.
It fundamentally changes you. You can't be that kind of selfish kind of person anymore. You got to be thinking about who you've created and what kind of life you want for them.
Yeah. How do you reconcile between you've obviously done well, you're able to provide lots of things for your children? How is that, how do you deal with how do I make them hungry? How do I make them ambitious? How do I encourage them to want, to be driven? How do you deal with those
I mean,
things?
I think I don't give it to them on a silver platter.
Yeah.
I've always given them a budget when they're at school and when they're at college. I've always helped them, but I've always given them a budget and sat down and said, right, if you want to do more than this, then you've got to go and earn some money, or you want to create this lifestyle, you want to get on a plane and go left, that's on you. You better go and make a lot of money. You know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've not brought my kids up in a way that, yes, darling, and anything you want, no problem. I've made them realize that it's hard work, and they've seen the ups and the downs, and that's made them kind of all hungry, and they all want to do things. They all want to achieve things in their own right.
Yes. Yeah, they're all driven and motivated in their
All
own way.
three of my kids are driven. I mean, my youngest one, she's graduate college this year.
Yeah.
She wants to move to New York and be in the beauty industry. She got herself work experience in New York last summer. She's just had a job whilst at college working for another great online consumer brand. She has been out networking, looking for jobs, and one of the persons she was networking with, who works for one of the big beauty companies, approached her yesterday and said, "I'm looking for an intern for the next few months. Is this something you'd be interested in? It's virtual." And she jumped on it and has arranged an interview for Monday. So, that's not come from me. I haven't said to her, "Listen, whilst you're at college, you've got to go and get work experience and earn some money." And she's absolutely done that on her own, I'm super proud of her. And she's super driven and motivated, and not just driven by money. This isn't about, I've got to go and get the biggest job and get paid the most money, but she knows what she wants to do, and she wants to be successful in her own right. And, and I think you make your own luck. I think there's, right place, right time. Absolutely. Element of luck in everything we do, timing, market conditions, what have you. But you get out what you put in. And
Yeah.
if you don't put hard work in, you're looking for a job. My middle daughter, who lives in New York, she wasn't enjoying her first job. So she decided she wanted to leave after a year, and she worked tirelessly to get another job. And she landed a phenomenal job just before Christmas, working at Pepsi in their e-commerce team in New York. And
Yes.
everyone she's met at Pepsi, in her first month, she's been there a month, month and a half, 2 months now. Everyone she's met is like, "Oh my God, how did you get the job?" They're like, thousands of people apply for any one role here.
Yes.
I mean, it's just, she was driven, she was motivated, she made it happen.
Yes. Well, it's incredible that, I mean, they've all clearly got some chutzpah, and inner confidence that I guess comes from you. Imagine that you hadn't had children. How do you think you'd be different now?
I think I'd be lonely. I think about how much of my life is filled up with my kids, and how is I don't speak to them now every day,
Yeah.
but I speak to them every few days, and I love to hear what's going on in their lives. How's work? What's the social scene? The friendships, relationships. Yeah, I just think I'd be, far less fulfilled, because as you know, this is not about how many dollars you've got in the bank account. You can be super rich and unhappy.
Yeah.
And we all know people like that.
Yeah.
This is about, how do you fill your days? What fills your cup? What excites you? What motivates you? And those relationships with my children, and how close I am to all three of my kids individually, and the things we all do together is, I would be much less of a person than I am today without my kids in my life.
How would you hope that they would talk about you? Not to you, but to other people.
I think that kind of warm, open, loving person.
Yeah.
Active listener, active participant in their lives.
Yeah.
We're super close, and that's because it's a two-way relationship.
Do you think if you, lost everything somehow, that you would feel, oh, well, that's just, karma, and I go at it again? Would that be your reaction, do you think? I've got the love of my family, so...
Absolutely, yes. I must confess, I'm at that age and stage where risk mitigation, I don't bet the house now. Obviously I did earlier on in my career, and I won't do that now. And I won't do that because I've got a responsibility to my family.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm still an entrepreneur and just started a new business with my son. We invested in it, but we invested what we could afford to invest. And we did not bet the house. We did not put all our money in it. And I think that's when you get that age and stage, I think it's very important to know how to manage your finances, how to manage your personal balance sheet, and, risk what you can afford to risk. So my risk profile has changed for sure.
Do you pass on this sort of knowledge and experience to your children, about how more sort of risk-taking you were when you were younger and how that changes over time? Are these sort of conversations you've had with them?
I do, and it's so ironic because my son, who has been very successful and has, made money age 21, he sold his first company, and his risk profile is so different to mine. And there have been quite a few investments he's made over the last 2 or 3 years that he suggested I should do, which I've not done, and he's been very successful in. And
Yeah.
he's like, I'm 25 years old. This is not, I can afford to, I'm investing money I can afford to lose, but I'd rather, 10x or 20x
Yeah.
than, grow at 5% a year.
Yes.
So we have a totally different risk profile for sure. And some of the bets he's done, I'm like, take some money off the table. He's like, but why would I? And he's got his justification, and I totally respect and understand that.
Do you encourage him? Or how does that work?
Listen, I think my job as a parent is to show him the other side of the narrative. So, and to be fair, he's not betting everything on one investment. He is invested in lots of things, and, he does bank with, my bankers, and they've, he is kind of schooled in kind of how you manage your money and your portfolio, and you don't put everything, you don't have 90% in one stock.
Yeah.
You have to have a diversified approach.
Yeah. So as you look forward to this sort of new evolved phase in your life, and you get the pleasure of watching your children grow and develop, one of the things that I like to ask about is, how you'd like to be remembered, not just by your children, but by your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. And obviously, you didn't know two of your grandparents, only by reputation. But, if you could, what message would you leave behind to future generations of your family?
I mean, I'm still aspiring to kind of create a legacy and to do something that's super meaningful, that I can leave my mark on my family for generations to come. So I'm still plugging away. But as I said at the start of the conversation, being present, being there for my family, creating this close family, and, my kids being close to each other, them growing up, where their kids are close to each other. That's what I can do. That's what I hope is the legacy that I leave behind, is a tight-knit unit for generations to come. Yeah. And that they support each other, financially, emotionally, that they're there for each other.
Yeah. With a core philosophy and core values, basically.
Absolutely. And putting more in than you get out.
Yeah.
And leaving the world a better place. And, I'm not an eco-warrior, but I'm conscious and I'm aware. And I think that, living with intention, I think is key.
You talked about some of the charitable activities or philanthropic activities that you have. What is it that moves you in that respect? What do you support?
I tell you what I love. And when we sold the last business, I set up my own charitable trust so that, my wife and I could donate every year out of that trust, which we do. I love supporting the next generation. One of my friend's sons just did a charity. And those are the kind of things that I love to support. When you see, friends, when they're involved in charities, I'm going to always support them. Friends' kids, I'm always going to support them. Yeah. That for me is very special.
I saw that some of the charities you've been involved in, RADA and the Weizmann Institute, Science Institute. So clearly knowledge, learning, the arts, these are all areas that are also interesting to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I like to end with a little quick-fire round, if you don't mind. Some questions I'm just going to hit you with. Just give me the first thought that comes into your head. What's one thing that's still on your bucket list that you'd like to do?
Oh, Alaska.
Alaska. Okay, great.
You're going to make it happen. You're writing it down. You're going to make it happen for me.
I might be. I mean... Which book or movie has had a major impact on you?
I love autobiographies. I read the Steve Jobs book, the Elon Musk book. I just read the Sam Bankman-Fried book. Yeah. I love the Andre Agassi book, David Goggins. Those to me, reading inspirational stories and what kind of drives people. Those are the books that excite me.
Yes. Well, you and I share those for sure. What everyday activity brings you the most joy?
Just being active every day. I work out in the gym a few mornings a week. I go for a walk every day. I mountain bike on the weekends. I, go to classes. Just being active and moving, and because I spend too much of my time sitting behind a desk and on Zoom calls and on in meetings. So being active is super important every day.
Was there a story or an experience when you were younger that inspired you? Could be a business one, could be a personal one.
I think kind of seeing inspirational people like Sir Richard Branson, for example, followed the kind of the Virgin story from right at the beginning of my career. And he's definitely someone who, I've never met him. He invested in one of my friend's companies here, and he's good friends with him. But I think someone who, has achieved a lot of business, has created multiple businesses, has created a brand, but at the same time has a huge amount of fun. He's a kite surfer. He's got Necker Island. I follow him on Instagram, and he's always having fun. And I know from my friend that is how he lives his life.
Yeah.
So for sure, he's someone who, I think of.
When I'm asked, I always give that, setting up Virgin to take on British Airways example, which to me is one of the most spectacular entrepreneurial acts in history. Complete lunacy, made no sense, but amazing.
Lunacy.
Yeah. In one word, how would you describe this stage of your life?
Expansive.
Love it. Well, Daniel, it's been amazing to have this time with you. Really great. Really enjoyed chatting to you, and look forward to a long and happy association with you, because I think I have a lot to learn from you.
Likewise. Friendship, please God. I mean, I really enjoyed the times we've spent together.
Yeah.
Long may they continue, and let's celebrate being alive and being active and healthy and enjoying what we do. And obviously for you and I, moving to California, we get to live the dream.
We do. Absolutely. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it. Speak to you soon. Take care, buddy. Thank you for listening to Echoes Across Time. If this conversation made you pause, reflect, or see legacy in a new way, share it with someone you'd want to remember you by. You can follow the journey and join our community wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm Tim Levy, reminding you your story is already part of someone else's legacy.